Good afternoon, and I want to welcome the officials of the Ministry of Sport and Youth Affairs and the Sport Company of Trinidad and Tobago, the members of the media, and the members of the public to this 14th public meeting of the Public Administration and Appropriations Committee. The Committee on Public Administration and Appropriations has a mandate to consider and report to the House on A, the budgetary expenditure of government agencies to ensure that expenditure is embarked upon in accordance with parliamentary approval. B, the budgetary expenditure of government agencies as it occurs and keeps Parliament informed of how the budget allocation is being implemented. And C, the administration of government agencies to determine hindrances to their efficiency and to make recommendations to the government for improvement of public administration. The purpose of this 14th public meeting of the Public Administration and Appropriations Committee for the 11th Parliament is to follow up with the Ministry of Sport and Youth Affairs with regard to the first report of the committee, as well as seek further information on the Ministry's current expenditure with specific reference to official travel to attend the Tobago House of Assembly Sports Award. The first report of the PAAC entailed an examination of the current expenditure of ministries and departments under 3 subheads: current transfers and subsidies, development program, consolidated fund, and infrastructure fund. This meeting is being held and will be broadcast live on the Parliament's channel 11, radio 105.5 FM, and the Parliament's YouTube channel, ParlView. The committee is desirous of hearing from the accounting officer and other key officials of the Ministry of Sport and Youth Affairs to determine whether the ministry has made progress with regard to the implementation of recommendations arising from the committee's first report. The committee is also seeking to determine any challenges faced in the implementations of the recommendations and to determine possible solutions to these challenges. The committee would also look into certain aspects of the ministry's current expenditure. The role of the committee is to assist the ministry to achieve efficient delivery of services while ensuring that expenditure is embarked upon in accordance with parliamentary approval. I will now invite the representatives of the Ministry of Sport and Youth Affairs and Sport Company of Trinidad and Tobago to introduce themselves. Madam Permanent Secretary.
Good afternoon. My name is Natasha Barrow. I'm the Acting Permanent Secretary in the Ministry of Sport and Youth Affairs.
Good afternoon. My name is Ian Ramsden, Deputy Permanent Secretary, Ministry of Sport and Youth Affairs.
Good afternoon. Deanne Rampadarat, Acting Senior Planning Officer, Ministry of Sport and Youth Affairs.
Good afternoon. Sherry Ann Smith-Simmons, Director of Human Resource Services, Ministry of Sport and Youth Affairs.
Good afternoon. Denise Arno, Acting Deputy Permanent Secretary, Ministry of Sport and Youth Affairs.
Good afternoon. My name is Jairaj Baliram, Auditor 2, Ministry of Sport and Youth Affairs.
Good afternoon. My name is Beatrice Ramlal, Acting Administrative Officer 5.
Good afternoon. I'm Mr. Patrice Charles, Acting Director, Physical Education and Sport.
Good afternoon. Erland Kent, Director, Youth Affairs.
Good afternoon. Anthony Blake, Head of the Facilities Unit at Sport Company.
Thank you very much. And I'll now invite the members of the committee to introduce themselves.
Good afternoon. Daniel Duque is my name, member of the committee.
Good afternoon. Maxi Coffey, member.
Good afternoon. Lakram Bodo, Vice Chairman.
Good afternoon. Wade Mark, member.
And I am Bridget Anisette George, Chairman. I will now invite the Permanent Secretary to make a brief opening statement.
Good afternoon again. At the Ministry of Sport and Youth Affairs, for this fiscal 2016-2017, we have continued our efforts at progress through trying to restructure our operations and the manner in which our business is conducted relative to the development of sport in Trinidad and Tobago. Having taken up the mantle of Permanent Secretary in this ministry in January this year, I have found the task of reviewing the operations and ensuring that the processes and procedures undertaken are being done in accordance with public sector mandates, and it has been challenging, to say the least. However, the progress that has been achieved are proof that perseverance and dedication are key to achieving our goals. It's imperative to know that we are currently undertaking a restructuring process at the Ministry of Sport and Youth Affairs, and that it is ongoing, and we are at a critical juncture towards organizational change. We plan to pursue the elimination of duplication and redundancies, and it's already underway. And we will be looking at establishing a sport commission in Trinidad and Tobago. This will impact on the overall organizational structure of the ministry as well as the existing sport company, and we hope to have it established before the end of this fiscal year. The Ministry of Sport has been operating without a national sport policy since 2012, and that being the year that the existing sport policy had expired, and the draft document is being developed right now, and it has been through a series of national consultations. This policy is also expected to be finalized before the end of this fiscal. Now, in an ideal world, the time would cease and progress, or the clock would stop, allowing the ministry to implement necessary projects which would result in the efficient and productive operations of the ministry. However, we are not so lucky, and it is that the business of sport and youth does not end. And it's in the midst of this implementation of our plans to restructure the organization that the day-to-day operations have been ongoing, and to this end we have different budgetary programs, projects and initiatives which have been ongoing with the ministry trying to do its part towards the successful implementation of Vision 2030. The ministry has continued to deliver on its mandate for sport and youth development and has embarked on a number of initiatives which seek to address the outlined thematic objectives as contained in the Vision 2030. In the area of sport, support is given to sporting organizations and athletes through the grant funding policy and elite athlete policy. Infrastructure works have continued on recreational and regional grounds around Trinidad and Tobago through the Sport TT and at various stages of completion. Upgrading of swimming pools has been ongoing, and a number of patrons are enjoying greater access to our swimming pools, especially with the implementation of the weekend swim. And the same progress is reflected in our indoor arenas, with a number of improvement works which have been executed. Relative in the area of youth development, steps have been taken for the evaluation and development of a youth policy. And again, this process will align the operations of the youth division to the overall landscape for youth in Trinidad and Tobago, implementing a youth-centric focus towards youth development. Refurbishment works have been ongoing. Again, there's a lot of infrastructure that is ongoing within the ministry, especially at the 2 youth apprenticeship centers. A number of key initiatives that satisfies both mandates of youth and sport are currently being undertaken by the Ministry of Sport. 2 proposals are currently being reviewed and refined for the implementation, such as a structured primary and secondary school sports program. This in turn will become a feeder program for the second proposal, which constitutes the development of a sport institute in Trinidad and Tobago. Through the conceptual stages, the proposed institute will comprise 5 or 6 sporting academies, and it's starting with the Brian Lara Academy. The academies, which are tentatively the disciplines of football, netball, track and field, volleyball, cricket, and aquatics, will collectively form the Sport Institute. As I said, these are all in the conceptual stages currently, and in an effort to ensure that the ongoing operations, a number of key vacancies have been filled, and the use of short-term employment is being steadily reduced. In the area of commerce and revenue generation, the Ministry of Sport and Youth Affairs, in collaboration with the Ministry of Tourism, have embarked on plans to pursue a sport tourism mandate. Focal points for operationalization have been centered on sport services, sport events, and sport infrastructure tourism. The sport tourism policy, as developed by the TDC with consultation with the Ministry of Sport and Youth Affairs, is expected to be finalized in the upcoming months. The rate structure is currently under review, and the process for the rental of sport facilities is also in the final stage of completion, of which the naming rights policy, which is currently being developed, will also be part thereof. In closing, the ministry has gone through a dramatic ordeal, and the management as well as the employees have been working to facilitate the day-to-day operations with limited resources, but more so towards the restructuring as well as the realignment of the ministry to the new mandate as stated in government's policy.
Thank you very much, Madam PS. I noted in your opening statement you spoke about short-term employment being steadily reduced. And I would like to open a discussion on that, particularly as it relates to your follow-up submission with respect to a table which shows that in October, this would be your short-term employees were 61?
Yeah.
Yes? So that when you said persons currently on short-term would be afforded the opportunity via a fair and transparent process to fill any contract positions. You're talking short-term, you mean short-term contract? Yes. So in October, you would have had 61 persons employed.
Yes.
And it means as of June the 1st, you now have 30?
Yes.
So employed on short-term contract?
No, they're now employed on contract.
They're now employed on contract?
Yeah, 3-year contracts.
Okay, so what would have happened to the other 31 people?
No, they're still there with the ministry. However, we're still in the process of, we're still going through a recruitment process. What we've done so far is actually just recruited for a number of positions, which we have listed on the next page. All right. And so what we basically did was we advertised the positions of facility manager, assistant facility manager, the business operations assistants, and we have now finalized that those positions and filled them.
All right. So of the 30 positions you filled, 9 of them will be 4 on short-term contract?
Yes. Yes.
So if my maths is right, 21 other people would have filled the positions?
Yes.
So how does that fit in with steadily reducing short-term contracts, particularly when you say the other people are still there?
The remainder are still there, the remainder from the 30. So, all right, we would have had 61 employed on short-term.
Yes.
Right, so we now have only 30 persons employed on short-term. The other persons are now, we have regularized.
So you've regularized how many?
We regularized, we no longer have 34 positions on, we eliminated 34 positions on short-term.
You eliminated 34 positions on short-term?
31, sorry.
You eliminated 31?
Yeah.
So those people are no longer there?
No, you just told me because we no longer have those positions were never really created. Yeah. So what we did is we advertised the actual existing contract positions and gave them the opportunity to participate in the recruitment process.
Right. And of those 31, of those 30, only 9 were of the original 61?
Yeah.
Yes?
Yeah.
All right. Okay. Thank you, because we needed some explanation with respect to this. I will open the panel for other questions. Well, Member Mark, sorry, I'd seen Member Bodo first. I'll take you after. Sorry about that.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Madam PS, I just wanted clarification. Now, you said you had 30. I just want to be sure that I understand what you're saying. So you have 30 people on contracts.
On short-term contracts.
On short-term contracts. And there were 31 from the original 61 remaining. You said that those 31 positions are no longer in existence.
Okay, the short-term employment positions, persons who are employed on short-term, there were no actual positions.
So are those, my question is, are those people still employed by the ministry or not?
No, they're no longer employed. 9 of the persons, they were successful in obtaining contract employment on a long-term basis.
So the 31 of the 61 no longer have jobs in the ministry?
No.
Okay, I just wanted to clarify that point.
Well, no, it will be 31 of the 61. It will be 61 minus 9.
Yes.
It will be 61 minus 9. That's how I understand
Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay? Member Mark.
No, but as you're saying that, oh, sorry, you said 37 positions were filled. If I may refer you, Madam Permanent Secretary, to page 2 of that submission. 37 positions were filled. 7 persons are yet to assume duty. Can you clarify that?
They were successful in the interviews. However, they would have had, if they were otherwise employed, they would have had to give their own notice.
But those 37 would not necessarily have been from the original 61?
No.
No, okay.
No.
I hear you.
Member Mark?
Madam Chair, I am somewhat, I need some clarification. We are being told that there were 30 persons on short-term contract.
61.
61. But you said out of the 61, there were 9 persons out of 30.
9 out of 61.
9 out of 61.
9 out of 61. 9 of the persons who were employed on short-term,
they were retained. Right. How many people initially were employed on short-term?
61.
61. And out of the 61, only 9 were retained?
Yes.
So where the rest have gone?
No, they're no longer employed with the ministry as they participated in a recruitment exercise where they went through the interviews and through GHRS.
But that company has died.
This was before that.
It's still alive?
No, at that time.
Oh, at that time it was alive?
Yeah.
But it has since passed on. No, I'm trying to get clarification on the matter, Madam Chair. What prompted the Ministry of Sport to embark on a new recruitment exercise that resulted in only 9 of the original 61 persons being retained? And what was the process of recruitment that you embarked upon to ensure that there was proper transparency in this exercise? How, in other words, Madam Chair, I'm asking, okay, you would have had a panel to interview people, that's all?
No, we utilize the services of GHRS.
GHRS?
To do the recruitment process for the ministry.
And they are the ones who did what you are now proposing and suggesting. It's a bit, I understand now. I
maybe,
understand, it's
Madam
confusing.
Permanent Secretary, if we ask a little more questions, we'll be clear. And I think what is creating some of our confusion is maybe the information. What we've been told here is 30 persons in the department or unit listed below are retained on short-term contract as of June 1st, 2017. So that, I think, is the wording and that creating some confusion with us, because it would appear from what you've said, you now have 30 people who are on contract, on short term. So what were the positions that have been, oh well, I don't want to use the word positions because you just said those weren't positions. The 61 people were on what?
The total 61 were on short-term employment.
Short-term employment.
Right.
And therefore, to help the committee, could you tell us what is the difference between short-term employment and short-term contract?
Okay, so short-term employment is when the permanent secretary gives approval to engage a person in short-term employment. Contract employment in the public service is normally a 3-year contract, between 1 to 3 years, and it would have had cabinet approval, where they would have created the positions and it's part of the organizational structure.
And that contract employment is called short-term, even though it's 1 to 3 years.
It's not short-term. No, that's not short-term. That's contract employment. That's normal long-term contract employment. Well, I use the word long-term, but it's no more than 3 years.
All right, so we come back again. You had 61 in October.
Right.
You now have 30 in June.
Yes.
These would not have been the people who would have filled positions.
9 of them did fill some of the positions.
Right.
Because they went through the process. Everybody had an opportunity to go through the process. 9 of them were successful.
All right.
And
what
were
happened
given
to the
3-year
52?
contracts. Huh?
What happened to the 52?
The 52?
Of the 61?
Oh, right. So, okay. So we haven't finished filling all of our contract positions. So we only had 37 vacancies that we filled so far.
And you still haven't answered my question. What has happened to the 52?
Of the 52, how many of them have been seen?
52 is 9.61. So only 9, the original person is 30.
So 21.
21.
Right, so 21 is no longer with the ministry. So of the 52, 21 are no longer with the ministry, and 30 are still with the ministry, employed on short term.
So those 30 are the people who are employed for 6 months. Those 30 people are those who are employed for 6 months and under.
Supposedly, yes. That's what's supposed to happen, yes.
Right. We know that doesn't happen in fact, and that people serve the 6 months and it is renewed and renewed and renewed.
Right.
Okay? And that's what generated the recommendation that we regularize persons employed on these 6 months and fill existing vacancies on the contract employment. All right? What you're saying is you went through an exercise, and of the 61 people you had on these 6-month employment terms, of that, 9 you converted into contracts.
Yes.
Agreed? Between 1 to 3 years, or 3-year contracts. And those would be the 9 people who are really business operations assistant, assistant facility manager, etc.
Yeah.
Okay? All right. So that you would have been left up with 52. You say now of the 52, 21 are no longer with you. Okay?
Yeah.
30 continue on a short-term employment, which is the 6 months.
Yes.
Okay. Now you just told us something about 34 positions were retired.
No.
What is that?
No, not retired. No.
No. So the way I've stated it is exactly as it is.
Yeah.
So you still have 30 people who are on recurrent 6-month employment.
Yes.
All right. Member Coffee.
Afternoon, PS. Are you aware of a directive from the Ministry of Finance to bring an end to short-term employment?
Yes.
And how do you account for the fact that you still have 30 persons on short-term employment?
We are trying to ensure that we do not end up with industrial relations, or at least we try to employ practices by reducing it, by making sure that we offer persons the opportunity for contract employment or other opportunities?
I'm not sure that there's an industrial relations issue, because with the persons on short-term employment, they are really on offer for services, and when you try to fill the positions, I assume that anyone who wishes to apply should have an opportunity to become engaged. So are you saying that the procurement process or the recruitment process is aimed at giving these 30 persons an opportunity to become fully engaged with the ministry?
As far as I'm aware, a lot of these persons were engaged for a longer period than just 6 months, and some of them even going back as far as 2 to 3 years. I do know that there are a number of different court matters before the industrial court with regards to whether or not these persons are currently employed on long-term employment and whether or not they're entitled to different benefits. On short-term employment, you're not entitled to certain things like, for example, any kind of leave or any kind of, and we have had cases where persons have taken or written trying to take us to court with regards to basically just terminating their employment without any due process.
Okay, so you've gotten legal advice on this
Yeah.
in terms of the way forward?
Well, what we have been doing is that we have been systematically trying to recruit persons through a proper process of contract employment.
Okay.
Okay, so Madam Pierce, I just have 2 other questions so that we'll be totally clear. We have 1 person missing from the 61. What has happened to that?
Mm-hmm.
21 was sent home, 30 remain on short-term employment. 9 were converted into contracts. So we have 1 person missing.
I'll have to confirm the figures, but
okay.
I think it's just our maths.
All right, okay. And let me ask something in terms of the 30 who've remained and the explanation that you just gave to Member Coffey. In your response, it was stated, and I'm reading what I've seen here, it is to be noted that a number of persons previously retained on short-term were not subjected to participate in any recruitment process, and in some instances, I expect it will be, in some instances, they did not possess the minimum qualification and experience for the job function they are currently performing. What has happened to these people who would have fitted into this statement?
Let me ask my director, HR.
These persons would have been allowed, being part of the organization already, would have been allowed to go through the process with the other qualified persons in order to justify their retainance. The fact that they did not meet the, obtain a position on the order merit list meant that they were not successful. And as such, were not offered contract employment.
So that they're no longer with y'all, or they're still there on short-term?
They are no longer with us as of 31st May 2017.
As of 31st May 2017?
Yes.
So that of the 30 that are left are people whom you feel would be able to fit into the organization?
Of the 30 persons, those persons are persons who we have approached Service Commission's department for vacancies within the establishment, and they have not been able to give us those persons. So we have secured persons on a short-term basis in order to maintain, for instance, aquatic officers in the pools, in order to provide the ready service needed by the ministry.
What officers you said that was? Aquatic officers.
Oh, sure.
Yeah. Sorry. Member Mark.
Through you, Madam Chair, you did indicate Madam Permanent Secretary, that the ministry was undertaking a review and rationalization of its short-term employment. I'm further to understand that that exercise is still to be completed. Am I right? Yes. Well, why, if that exercise is to be completed, why did we employ the human resource company to exercise this, to engage this company to conduct interviews involving all those persons who were on short-term contracts? And in that interviewing process, some were eliminated because, as you said, they didn't fit qualification, experience, and they seemed to be square pegs in round holes. And at the same time, the review and rationalization exercise for short-term employment at the ministry is not yet completed. Because I would have thought that you would have had a review first, and out of that report, they would have indicated, well, look, we only need X number of persons, and you have 61. So all you need is 31. And therefore, you don't have the resources to conduct the interviews. So you engage a consulting firm, the company, Government Human Resource Services. I'm trying to understand whether the action taken was a bit premature, having regard to what you have stated in your document. What was this review and rationalization of short-term employment about? I'm not too clear. Could you explain that to us?
Okay. The ministry has the peculiar division, which is the Physical Education and Sport Division, which has some positions, and the type of positions that are in that division are somewhat outdated. And it has been difficult to recruit persons or to determine what type of positions we actually need in that division. And the short-term rationalization, I believe, when we say we have not finished it, it's more along the lines of that particular division, because a lot of the short-term is actually in the swimming pools and the indoor arenas. So we're really trying, we really don't want to keep back the entire process of making sure that we have adequate resources at these different facilities, because we were very clear that, we understood that we needed to have facility managers and assistant facility managers. Business operations assistants are more or less across the public service. So what we have not finished really is the peculiar positions that may be under the ministry that we currently have on that when you're talking about actually rationalizing how we want to go about it. And we really we haven't approached PMCD as yet with regards to acquiring their assistance to help us with that undertaking.
Madam Chair, would you want to share with us what is the establishment or the number of personnel employed in the Physical Education Sport Division, the overall number of personnel employed?
There are approximately 111 offices, of which 46 positions are substantively filled, and there are 55 vacancies.
Out of that 100, how many of them are on short-term employment within that division?
The short-term personnel is not on the permanent establishment. The short-term personnel seeks to fill the void that the vacancies have left.
Do you have any short-term employment or personnel in this division outside of the numbers that you have just given us, the 100 and above?
The 111 is established positions. The short term would be, just hold on a minute. Where is it? Short term would be 26 persons.
Can you, through the chairman,
Sorry, go ahead.
so in that division we have 26 short-term employees. Is that right? Am I correct?
Yeah, I'm just making a quick adjustment.
Okay.
Let me just say, if you look back on the first page of our report, we did have under the Director of Physical Education and Sport, 19 positions currently on short term. That's under the Sport Division.
90 or 19?
19, 19.
Okay. Could you advise this committee how soon you would be embarking on this review and rationalization exercise?
We have, in fact, had a consultation with PMCD today. We had initially engaged their services in last year, but because of our relocation efforts from September to February of this year, we were not able to have any meetings. So we have scheduled a meeting with PMCD for later this month. A date has not been assigned.
Can I ask, Madam Chair, do you have representation going back to the government human resource services company that has now expired, but whilst they were living, could you tell me, would you have had representation on the panel that were responsible for interviewing, recruiting, and then making a final determination as to who should stay and who should go? Would the Ministry of Sport have representation on that panel?
Yes.
And could you explain to us?
They participated as a panel member in all the interviews.
So how many people comprise the panel?
3 persons.
3 persons? One from
person
the
from the ministry.
Okay. And the actual interviews would have taken place at the Ministry of Sport, or would it be at the offices?
At GHRS.
At GHRS. Okay.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Madam PS, if I could refer again to the follow-up report and draw your attention to page 3. And that recommendation is develop a comprehensive maintenance plan for each large sporting facility under its purview, which must be custom designed to suit the needs of each facility. And if we can just turn the page, because with regard, and the first paragraph reads, with regard to the Sports Company of Trinidad and Tobago, has advised that a revised organizational structure and so on. But I'm asking here, in the interim, you're stating that sport has recruited through the OJT program suitable qualified individuals in the area of clerical officers, engineers, and technicians. My question, Madam PS, is that how many of these positions have been filled? How were they filled? And for how long these positions would have been filled?
Good afternoon to the committee, Anthony Blake Sport Company. As so far as Sport Company is concerned, for the members' question, we would have recruited, as stated here, suitably qualified officials from or individuals from the OJT program, based on the fact that the org structure is not yet approved for the new national centers. We've had some of the OJTs with us for in excess of 18 months. training as clerical officers, engineering staff, and so on. Our maintenance contractor, the design build contractor, has provided us with a training plan for the new national facilities in terms of maintenance and operations. And the existing staff at Sport Company engineering team, along with our OJT professionals, have been training alongside their engineering team.
And that's true, Madam Chair. I'm just wondering in terms of numbers.
Sure. So we, at this point in time, in terms of administrative staff, we have approximately 20 individuals training from the OJT program. We also have, in terms of the engineering team, we have 6 engineering technicians from the OJT program. We've also recruited recently for engineering professionals and technicians. We have approximately 400 people shortlisted so far that have responded, and we're going through the due diligence exercise to get these people properly vetted and so on.
And these would be for how many positions, engineering positions?
The engineering positions are approximately 20 positions.
So for 400 applications for 20 positions?
Yes, sir.
I'm just trying to put it in perspective.
Sure.
Thank you.
Member Duki.
Thank you, Madam Chair. For my own clarification and to help me with a little confusion in my mind, to the acting permanent secretary, did you say a while ago that a number of short-term employees have been in the employ of the ministry for a number of years?
Yes.
And generally, what would account for that?
Well, there was...
Short-term means, by definition. Could you help me with that?
A number of positions, as far as I am aware, a number of positions would have become vacant, well, they would have expired. And in order to ensure that the ministry's work continued, persons would have been re-engaged on a short-term basis while the ministry continued to seek to have the positions retained. I am going to ask my director, HR, if she could provide any further clarification and any other reasons.
As I said before, service commissions, for instance, we would have approached service commissions for personnel, for peculiar positions, and they were not able to give us those persons. So we had to recruit persons in order to meet the needs of the ministry in those areas.
I'm trying to get to an employee who has been employed under, as you term it, short-term employment, which from your definition is different from short-term contract. So he or she is employed for less than 6 months initially.
6 months maximum is what it's supposed to be.
6 months or less. But you're saying that in a number of cases, that particular employee would have been employed for a number of years.
Would have been, yes.
So, and the explanation you would have given, you're telling me that is what would have accounted for?
Would have accounted. Would have been contract positions that would have expired, and the services were needed, and they hadn't yet approached cabinet for renewals, and in some cases the 6-year plan, which the previous administration had required, were not approved. So persons were retained under those conditions.
And is there a specific policy in the ministry regarding short-term employment?
No, there isn't.
Member Coffey.
Thank you, Madam Chair. PS, have you considered in terms of the peculiar positions approaching the Director of Personnel Administration to recruit persons under Section 13(5) of the Public Service Regulations?
Yes, we have. For most of our peculiar positions, we had requested them to advertise and do the necessary recruitment process. They have started with some. For instance, they advertised the Physical Education Sport Officer one sometime earlier this year, but the other officers, they have not yet addressed.
No, I understand that. What I was seeking to find out is whether you would have sought the approval of the Commission so that the ministry itself could recruit for peculiar positions under that regulation.
No, we haven't.
No, we haven't.
Okay.
Member Bodo.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Madam PS, if I could draw your attention to page 5 of your submission with regards to the site visits, and I have 2 questions there. One is with regards to the youth centers, and I note that there are 3 centers there listed where no visits were conducted: Basilor Youth Center, the Malik Youth Center, and the Laventil Youth Center. Can you perhaps explain to the committee why this is so?
This was at the time of when we are currently now undertaking to do site visits at the different areas. So it's just that we have not reached to these as yet.
So I take it that will be done during the course of the financial year?
Yeah, within this financial.
Thank you. Madam PS, the other thing I'm concerned about here would be just following those listing. There is a statement saying that there are no official reports on the site visits conducted at the ministry's facilities. Can you tell this committee if that in fact is so?
That is the case. What has been happening is that it's not an official site report that I can produce for you. What has been happening is that they have been undertaking the different issues raised, and when they do the site visits, and they actually, because a lot of the things are ongoing, we have been trying to effect different repairs, different upgrades as we go along. So what I did have this conversation with our project unit, and I have instructed them that we are to have site visit reports every site visit.
I'm a little bit concerned about that, Madam PS. I mean, how can you be expending funds? Because I'm sure certain expenditure will be involved here in terms of dealing with the operational and maintenance issues and so on.
Yes, the site visit.
So are you saying that there is no policy at all for you to receive a report of a site visit?
No, there isn't. But what they had been doing is that they would refer to the site visit in the recommendation or in the proposal for the different upgrades or the different maintenance that needed to happen at the different facilities.
But then whose responsibility it would be to correct that situation going forward?
As
and
I
how
said,
soon
yeah,
can
so
I
as I
expect
said,
that will be
I
corrected?
did instruct our project unit with regards to all of the different site visits that they would be expected to produce a site visit report for each of them.
So this committee can take it that will be the process going forward?
Yes, it will.
Thank you.
Might I ask, going forward from when? When was the last site visit report with any one of these centers?
Right, so the site visit report, we do have one for Dwight York, which we did do.
So that would be the first one?
That's the first one.
Based on your instruction?
Yeah.
So that, with what confidence can the statement be made that operational and maintenance issues which have been raised by managers of each facilities are dealt with? If there's no report to say what was found, what corrective action is going to be taken, then how can one say this with any sort of confidence?
Yeah. And I agree. It needed to happen so that the reports that we can follow the reports and we can track the progress, because otherwise we would just be out in fires all the time.
Okay. Is there a schedule for these visits?
Not as yet. We are supposed to come up with a schedule.
So when you mean not as yet, so you mean we are in term nearly the end of the fiscal 2017, and some, I see here, Eastern Regional Indoor Sports Arena, 10 visits, La Hawkinson Swimming Pool, 10 visits, Coquet Swimming Pool, 20, Southwest Regional Indoor Sport Arena, 10. Then you have like Sandy Grande Swimming Pool, 2.
Yeah.
So for all of these are on schedule?
Yes. They would have been based on needs that might have been arising at the different facilities. As I said, it was being done very ad hoc, which we are trying to change now.
All right. I just want to ask one question of Ms. Smith-Simmons, just going back, and then therefore I'll invite other members. This is in respect to the Physical Education and Sport Division that has a little confusion in my mind that I need cleared up. we were told that the organizational structure review, which was supposed to be March 2017, has not been completed.
No, it hasn't.
Okay. We were also told that you all had not consulted PMCD and CPU on any assistance because until you finish your own process of rationalization, you wouldn't go to them.
Yes, correct.
Yes? But I thought, and I might have been mistaken, a short while ago you had said that a meeting with PMCD was scheduled.
Last year, when Ms. Mendez was here, she had written to PMCD informing them of the need for the ministry to review its organizational chart. They had in fact responded requesting some information which we provided. However, the last communication was about November of last year, and at that time we were in the process of moving. So nothing happened between November of last year and this year. But what we have done is we have engaged the heads of division to determine what the needs of the individual units and divisions are. For instance, we have also looked at the physical education and sport officer, JD, as well as the org chart and a revised org chart for physical education and sport division. What we have not done was had a consultation with PMCD on the matter and CPU.
This consultation was based on the fact that you weren't moving and not because you hadn't finished your own internal determination.
Right.
So this answer then is not a correct answer then. I just want to get it
It's just that it was not completed. It was asked if it was completed. We were in the process, but we have not completed it.
That's your review?
The review.
The consultation with PMCD and CPU, from what you're telling me, could have been done even though your review was not completed?
It could not have been done because we were moving from September to February is the only time in which we would have had access to files and documentation.
All right. So that therefore my understanding is what prevented that from taking place was the moving and the whole dislocation.
Correct.
And not that the process had to go in a particular sequence.
No.
Okay, good. All right. So, you don't have coffee.
Madam PS, I just want to go back to the side visits to the facilities. When I look at the table, I get a different impression because I know where the Ministry of Sport is and was, and the Basda Youth Center, the Malik Youth Center, and the Laventil Youth Center, I would think are the facilities closest to the ministry, but yet they received no visits. And the St. James Youth Center got 20 visits, and the Kokoye Swimming Pool got 20 visits. Now, would somebody be able to say what was the nature of the problems that would have led to these getting so many visits and no visits to Basilo, Malik, or Laventil, which all fall in the same area and an area that is close to the ministry's offices?
What I can say is that I can provide you with the actual documentation with regards to the actual physical infrastructure, but I do know that at these particular facilities, that infrastructure projects were being undertaken and carried out, which necessitated repeat visits, not necessarily that they were being targeted in particular.
No,
I don't have the actual infrastructure that might have been carried out at the facilities.
So am I to assume that there were no problems, no issues in Malik, Laventil, or Basilo Street?
I would not assume that. I would say that it's just that it didn't necessitate maybe a site visit.
Okay. Member Duki?
Taking off from where Member Coffey left off in terms of site visit? Is it that site visits only occur if there's infrastructural work taking place? Because I kind of gleaned that from your answer.
Only if there's either maintenance
or
and infrastructure work.
that site visits are made.
At present, that was what was
therefore,
happening.
if there's no works like that ongoing, then there will be no visit to the...
Right, so that was what was happening. What I'm saying is that right now, what the ministry is embarking, we are trying to do site visits at all the different facilities. It's just that we have not reached to the 3 that haven't had site visits as yet.
Okay, ma'am.
Member Bodo, I'll take you after Member Mark.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Madam PS, there is something that is troubling me about these site visits, and I want to go back to a very fundamental issue. What process is there for you to assure yourself, as the accounting officer in the ministry, that these site visits in fact take place? Because that's a question now that comes to my mind in view of the perceived, I don't want to use the word irregularities. So if you can tell us, what process is in place to give yourself assurance that these are actually taking place, and of course, by extension, the taxpayer.
Well, I completely agree with you, which is why, as I said, we only recently instituted the fact that all the different site visits, we need to have site visit reports, and they are being linked to the different issues and the maintenance issues that collaborated with the different facility managers with regards to the problems and the different maintenance issues that might be at the different facilities. But other than that, right now, no, there was no reconciliation of that.
No, but the point I'm making, Madam PS, is a fundamental point. Is it, how can you, what assurance do you have the visits actually take place? Is it somebody reports back to someone under you? I'm not talking about the lack of a report. That's a completely different matter. I'm speaking to the actual performance of a site visit. How do you have the assurance that somebody actually went on site? Is that documented in some way? That's what I'm asking.
It would be with the facility managers, and they would normally report to their individual directors, which is the Director of Physical Education and Sport and the Director of Youth.
All right, so there is assurance that these visits have actually taken place.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Member Mark?
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. Madam Chair, I want to go back to the short-term employment and to ask the PS whether, and maybe the human resource manager, in light of the fact that many of the workers who have been sent home, who are on short-term contracts, short-term employment, I should say, may have worked for the ministry or at the ministry for a considerable period of time. Because remember, as the chairman said earlier, these things tend to roll over. 6 months, another 6 months. So you may have somebody on short-term contract or short-term employment to be, to capture the concept properly. And they may go to, as I said, over 5 years. Would you say that there is an absence of proper industrial relations practice on your part, on the ministry's part, to have had these people working for so long, and then through a recruitment process, they are disposed of? Have they, when these people were sent home, were they given any kind of benefits? Or were they just, their services just came to an end? Could you explain to us?
Persons were given 1 month's notice with regards to the fact that the contracts and they would have been coming to an end. But prior to that, it would have been while they were participating in the recruitment process, they would have known that we would not be retaining persons after we had filled the contract positions. So they would have known in advance that if they were not successful in the recruitment process, that they would no longer be retained.
Yeah, but were they offered any, did you meet with the CPO on these matters to determine whether these workers who have been there for 5 years and above on short-term employment ought to be given some kind of compassionate gratuity as they depart the services or the employment of the ministry?
I did not seek the advice of the CPO department in this particular instance, in this ministry, but I am aware that the CPO department is working on a short-term employment policy with regards to that area.
Madam Chair, I just would like to ask the Permanent Secretary, do you have a strategic plan?
Not at the moment. We are looking at creating a strategic plan, but it hinges on both the youth policy as well as the sport policy, as well as the administrative reform that I spoke about before. Because even though we may look at, what we have done is that at our heads meetings, we've tried to look at a kind of a one-year action plan, at least in the interim, but we didn't want to sit down and do an entire strategic plan without having the youth policy and the sport policy clearly defined.
Well, that explains some of the challenges that you're faced with, because you seem to be taking decisions, as the youth would say, on the fly. And you have a situation where you don't have a sports policy, you don't have a strategic plan. You indicated here that you are going to develop a comprehensive maintenance plan, but there is no, I should ask rather, have you developed a comprehensive maintenance plan thus far?
Not for the smaller facilities. We have been liaising with Sport TT with regards to the development of our actual maintenance plan for the larger facilities, including the stadiums. Because as you know, Dwight York is also under the ministry. So what we plan to do is link that, and because we did note that there was a recommendation with regards to it being specific to the different facilities as a recommendation by the committee. So we do want to do that. So we have been working with the Sport TT to try to develop a maintenance plan that is specific to the different individuals' facilities themselves.
So we are now liaising with the sports company with a view to developing a comprehensive maintenance plan for the larger sporting facilities. So prior to you, when I say you as PS, liaising with the sport company, we don't have a maintenance plan. That explains the state of the Dwight York Stadium today. And it means to say that the taxpayers are not really getting value for their money, because they have invested a lot of money in all these facilities. What assurances do we have that the aquatic center, the tennis court, the cycling center wouldn't meet the same fate as the Dwight York Stadium after the taxpayers have spent hundreds of millions of dollars? Because I am not being given the assurance by you or your team that anything is being done with any degree of emergency to develop quickly a comprehensive maintenance plan for all of our large facilities. What you have just told us is that you are liaising. When would we be able to get from the Ministry of Sport and the sport company a comprehensive maintenance plan?
So Member Mark, do I take it that there are two questions? One, the assurance that the aquatic center and the tennis center and so don't suffer the fate of like the Dwight York Stadium.
Right.
So that the PS will answer what is the difference with those.
Right.
And then also the second question would be that we would like to know when the ministry would have a comprehensive maintenance plan.
Thank you.
Okay, I'm going to let Mr. Blake from Sport TT answer that, but I do know that there are maintenance plans that have been developed for the larger facilities. What I had said is that our smaller facilities within the ministry, we are now liaising with Sport TT to develop maintenance plans for these smaller facilities, like the swimming pools and the indoor arenas. But I will let Mr. Blake.
And maybe when Mr. Blake answers, maybe he could distinguish for us what are these mega facilities vis-a-vis what are the nationals, vis-a-vis what are the smaller facilities.
Thank you, Chair. So, with regards to the facilities under the Sport Company of Trinidad and Tobago, I want to give the committee the assurance that we do have fully ventilated maintenance plans for them. And as the chairperson would have asked, the nationals are the aquatic center, cycling velodrome, the tennis center, Sandy Grande Indoor. What would have been done is during the design build contract, part of the scope for the contractor was to develop maintenance plans for these facilities. So the design build contractor has been contracted during the defects liability period to provide maintenance services on these facilities. A copy of the maintenance plans have been supplied to the committee here. So I want to give you the assurance again that the nationals under Sport Company have the maintenance plans in place, and we're well underway in terms of the maintenance cycles of these facilities. With regards to the larger facilities, which are the National Stadium in Port of Spain, the Dwight York Stadium, the Larry Gomes, Manny Ramjohn, and Atto Boland Stadium. These facilities were handed over to Sport Company approximately 7 to 8 years ago from the Ministry of Sport. I want to say what we would have done in the initial phase is a preliminary conditional assessment, because any good maintenance plan, the backbone of that is a conditional assessment. It would give you the scope of works and the budget to be able to move forward to upgrade these facilities and put them in a maintainable state. We've also supplied for this committee, through the Permanent Secretary in the Ministry of Sport, a copy of the conditional assessments for the existing national stadia at this point in time. And as I said, that conditional assessment also contains budgetary estimates to bring these facilities up to a maintainable state. The maintenance plan now for the National Stadium, Larry Gomes and the others can only be put in place properly when we have the upgrade done to the facility. Part of the challenge that the Sport Company has had is the allocation of funding towards maintenance. You see, we must first upgrade the facilities to a maintainable state and then put the maintenance plan in place. A lot of the assets, for instance, in the Hazley Crawford Stadium have passed their serviceable life. So it's not an issue of a maintenance plan for a generator that is 20 years past its serviceable life. It's actually capital replacement of assets and then putting your maintenance plan in place. Thank you.
Member Coffey.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Mr. Blake, you mentioned earlier that these facilities were handed over 7 years ago. When I look at the report on the Dwight York Stadium, it suggests that the issues would have been occurring for some time before 2017 or 2016, when the financial issues became tighter. So in those 7 years, what was being done to ensure that the Dwight York Stadium did not fall into the kind of disrepair that the OSH report suggests? Because if you were spending time doing an assessment, the assessment could not have taken 7 years. There must have been work taking place in terms of the maintenance of Dwight York over those years that would have prevented the kind of report that we're seeing here for the facility.
So I want to agree with you, sir. Just to say that the Dwight York Stadium itself is not under the sport company, but I will attempt to answer the question. In my experience, there's been a lack of, how should I say, a lack of impetus in terms of maintenance, admittedly, from the ministries and the sport company standpoint. Resources determine where your focus is. And if you look at the allocation in terms of the resources for maintenance, that has not been there. Even in the time before the 2017, 2016, and so on, a large part of the maintenance has been reactive, per se, and I would say that admittedly because of the funding that was allocated to it at the point in time. The ministry's personnel may be able to elucidate. They may have a lot more institutional memory for the exact facility itself, but admittedly, maintenance in those larger facilities for some time has been very reactive, and that needs to be changed.
Member Duki.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Mr. Blake, you indicated that there are maintenance plans in place for the larger facilities based on the contractual agreement with these relevant contractors. So the plans are in place. Are we equipped, or are you equipped, your organization, to ensure that these plans can be successfully operationalized? Because the plans are there to make sure that the plans are implemented. Do you have, for example, the technical capability and or other resources to ensure that what is on paper can be operationalized?
Right, so at this point in time, the maintenance plans are being operationalized, but I would have to say it is basically being operationalized through the good graces of the design build contractor. We still struggle at this point in time in terms of resources for maintenance, and you are so correct in terms of the technical expertise and so on. I would have mentioned earlier that we've looked at the OJT program as a stopgap measure to recruit qualified professionals and so on, but we really need the resources. Money is not the cure for everything, but it does help. If we get the resources, we'll be able to recruit the qualified people and so on. So we do need help, admittedly.
Member Duki. Member Bodo.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Madam PS, in your opening remarks, you mentioned the Sport Commission of Trinidad and Tobago and a Sport Institute, and you did mention what would comprise the Sport Institute. Can you perhaps tell the committee just an idea of what would be the difference between the Commission and the Sports Institute in terms of how they will function?
The Sport Institute would be part of the Sport Commission, so it would fall under the Sport Commission. But what we are trying to do is actually move it forward, because we are still in the process right now of going to look at what the actual structure would be like for the Sport Commission. I know that right now the tender did go out with regards to the engagement of a consultant or consultancy firm to help establish the Sport Commission, and the Sport Institute would actually fall under that, under the commission.
Yeah, what would be the purpose of the Sport Commission, the overall vision, sort of?
It would take over responsibility for sport in its entirety. So the ministry would now be more in a position to look at policy rather than things like the actual infrastructure or the management and the administration of sport.
So you're saying it will be more of an implementation organization. Is that what you're saying?
It would take that too, but it would also be an overarching body.
And I just wanted to clarify again during your opening submission, Madam PS. I'm not sure whether you said traumatic or dramatic ordeal. Would you care to clarify and whether I got that correct and what you were referring to?
I think it was dramatic. Traumatic.
You didn't expand. Perhaps you would care to expand on that.
Well, I know that this ministry, since I've been there, I know that you all would all be aware of we have the life sport issues that would have been coming forward with this ministry, and having to deal with the backlash of that and persons coming forward, that there's been a lot of need for healing within this Ministry of Sport and Youth Affairs. So I think that is what I meant.
Okay, I just want to ask a few more questions and then I'll turn over to Member Mark. Madam PS, as far as the sport facility managers, I see in the submission that a number of persons have been hired for different facilities. And I see a discrepancy in salary and transportation. What would account for this? This is page 3 of the submission. There's a table. So for instance, sports facility manager Dwight York would be getting a salary $20,800 and transportation $1,300. Sport facility manager Shagonas would be getting $8,800 salary, $880 transportation. And within the various other positions, which would appear to be the same sports facility manager, there are other variances. Could you explain what accounts for that?
Okay, the CPO has designed a contract table where we look at the person 3 years and over, 3 years under, 6 years and over, and they have designed the salaries. So that's what we use.
All right. So let me ask something. If you were St. Paul Street sports facility manager, I would assume that your experience would fall within the band of the one here as the sports facility manager, Dwight York Stadium. Okay, because the salaries are the same.
No, the person at St. Paul Street has been employed for more than 6 years, and that's why she received that salary. That's nothing to do with where they are.
I understand that. So I'm saying within the same band of experience, because the sports facility manager, Dwight York Stadium, gets almost a similar salary.
Dwight York.
Because what I understood you to say is that there's a table with, say, a range of experience, and you fall within that and you get a certain salary.
Yes.
Yes? So if I understand what you're saying, the one for St. Paul Street should fall within the same sort of range as the one for Dwight York Stadium.
Yes, it should.
Okay.
I'm thinking that.
But why isn't there then a transportation, I guess must be allowance, because the table doesn't say it. Why is there one for Dwight York and none for St. Paul Street, based on what you have given me as the sort of categorization for compensation?
Yes, that will have to be checked. I'm not sure why the Dwight York person has the traveling allowance.
Dwight York has it?
Yes.
St. Paul Street doesn't have it?
No.
Southwest, I guess, regional doesn't have it either.
Okay, what has happened as well is that the terms and conditions of employment have not been established by the CPO. And these persons the persons were previously employed as assistant facility managers, and then CPO changed the position to business operation assistant 2. So these persons, the three persons that came from the sport facilities, whose terms have not yet been actually given by the CPO, their traveling allowances were withheld.
And within those 3 that you have identified, do I take it then that the Eastern Regional has falls into a different band of experience?
Yes, she has a different experience.
All right. That's one more question. As far as I'm going back now a little further, Madam PS, What we've been told, of the 37 positions filled, 7 are yet to assume duty. Could you account for why?
They would have had to give notice. They would have had to give notice at their other places of employment, and that's when they said that they would be able to assume duty.
So the date of assumption of duty will vary amongst them?
Yeah.
And could you say when the last of the 7 would assume duty? July of
this year.
So that the other 6 between now and the end of this month should assume duty?
Yes.
Yes?
But between now and July. Between
now and the end of this month, the other 6
yes,
should
the end of this
assume?
month, yes. Yes.
All right. And one other thing, your table on page 2. These are the 9 people who are already on short-term employment who've been converted to contract. In the case of one person, a business operation assistant, I see that their date of assumption is July 3rd, 2017. Is that correct?
Yeah.
And may I ask why? She's on maternity leave?
Yes.
And therefore, what happens in...
When her leave expires, she will assume.
All right, and what is happening to the, I don't want to say the position, but the function in the meantime? The execution of the duty. Because this was, if I understand it, short term, 6 months. So what is happening with this function in the meantime?
Well, other persons in the ministry performing the duties, assisting the due division with the function of her duties.
So would this be people who are already employed as sharing the responsibility?
Yes. Yes.
And not that somebody's been hired on a short-term
No, no one has been
employment?
hired. No, these persons are public servants who are also there.
Okay, all right. Member Bodo, and then I'll take Member Mark.
Thank you, Madam Chair. In terms of all of the restructuring and some of the employees no longer having positions and so on, can you indicate whether any employees at the ministry have had to be compensated for wrongful dismissal or termination?
Not that I'm aware of.
Member Mark.
Thank you, Madam. Permanent Secretary, I would like to, through the chair, raise the issue of travel. And that has to do with issues surrounding the Tobago House of Assembly Sports Awards. Now, based on your submission to this committee, you did outline the business that would have been attended to on this particular occasion, and you went on further to identify the invitation that would have been issued to initially some 9 officers. You did indicate that. You went on further to identify the actual names of those officers and those persons who actually attended, which moved from 9 officers to 12 officers. The question, we also understand from your submission that the overall budget amounted to some $91,910.43. And you gave a breakdown of how that was arrived at. What we would like to, without detaining you and outlining the names, I think this is now public knowledge of the 9 persons and now the 12 persons. Would you want to share with this committee how did the additional 3 persons affect the expenditure for this particular trip? That's one. And were the 2 administrative professionals necessary for the trip to Tobago? You would like to explain to this committee or share with us your views or your submission?
Well, I would like to say that with regards to the administrative support, as I had mentioned, we did have a number of other meetings to attend that we were with the sport division and with the THA that spanned, because as you know, a lot of our work would be entailed on a work day, normal weekday. I mean, at the end of the day, I guess we could have possibly done without. I'm not saying no. At the time, we felt that there was sufficient need at the time, but especially with regards to the types of meetings that we were having, and especially with the type of work that we wanted to undertake with the THA, that we felt that, you know, it was necessary to make sure that we had proper records of the meetings. However, I would be guided by the committee with regards to the necessity for carrying the administrative support.
No, we would want to get your guidance on this matter, because here it is, Trinidad and Tobago, as you're well aware, permanent secretary, and as the accounting officer, is going through extremely difficult financial times, and every penny counts. So I would like you to explain to this committee why an invitation that was issued to 9 persons initially extended itself to 12. As I said, 3 additional persons. And I would like you to really indicate to this committee how these 3 persons were added. You were giving us some story there.
No,
not story. Let me withdraw that word. Explanation that maybe they needed some support, that is a team, secretarial support, and the amount of meetings and that sort of things. But you will know that these are very difficult times, and we have to cut back expenditure as much as possible. And if we are being invited, and 9 persons have been invited, we would like to have from you as the accounting officer, because at the end of the day, you are the accounting officer, and you would have had to give authorization for these additional persons. What this committee would like to find out from you is what was the rationale and justification for this additional expenditure which taxpayers are being called upon to foot. So could you guide us on this matter rather than seek our guidance? We would like to have your guidance on this.
Okay, I did not see it as additional expenditure because of the fact that we had been scheduled to previously go to Tobago with Sport TT, especially with regards to the Dwight York Stadium, as well as the other meetings that what we basically did was combine when we got the invitation for the sports awards. We combined the trip. Now, the persons who were originally scheduled to go to Tobago were mostly the persons who had been invited to the sports awards. The additional persons to the sports awards didn't actually cost the ministry any additional funds, because they would have been going with us to the other trip anyway. The reason why we didn't go before was because we knew that we had the opening of the Brian Lara, and we had to postpone and reschedule the trip because we didn't want to overextend our resources and ensuring that event took place. And so at the time, when we were looking at it and we said that, well, we would basically do everything in one, because most of the persons were already included. The 3 additional persons didn't, there wasn't a cost to the ministry with regards to them going to the sports awards itself. Because we asked, we basically just asked the THA if they could have facilitated their attendance as they would have already been there in Tobago.
So are you telling this committee that they paid their way?
No.
Or are you saying that the THA underwrote the costs for the 3 additional persons? Who actually paid in the final analysis?
No, what I'm saying.
No, I'm asking. Who paid? Was it the taxpayers of Trinidad and Tobago that paid for it? Was it the THA as a separate unit, always taxpayers' money? Who actually paid at the end of the day for this?
The ministry paid.
No,
Ministry
the
of
ministry.
Sport and Youth Affairs, yes.
Yeah, the ministry paid.
Yes.
But it's the taxpayers
Yes.
paid at the end of the day.
My point is that they were intended to go in any event because we had a previous trip scheduled. And because we decided to combine the trip, it wasn't that they were now being added because we were going to the THA Awards. What I'm saying is that they were already included in our previous trip, and because they were going to the trip, we just asked the THA if they could have included them to come to attend the function.
How does the ministry select and approve travel expenditure? Could you share with the committee how you go about this?
Well, normally it would be dependent on whether, if it is that we would normally have a invitation, it would normally be put up by the relevant division and sent up for approval by the permanent secretary.
Is there a ceiling on the total cost of a trip within Trinidad and Tobago? Do you have a ceiling that you establish, or it just is like business as usual, even though we are in serious economic times?
There is no ceiling.
There's a ceiling?
No.
There's no ceiling?
No.
Thank you, Madam.
Member Boodoo.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Madam PS, 3 questions, I'll ask them separately. In terms of the addition of the 3 persons to the those who were previously invited, who would have authorized that addition? Would it have been yourself or someone else?
With regards to the different persons, they would have been for different reasons.
The additional 3 people.
Right, they would have been for different reasons. My assistant came with, well, I would have authorized her, I would have required her presence. The minister would have required his assistant, and the person from communications would have been, because anytime we have any event, a person from communications usually covers the event.
And my question to follow up on that, in terms of choosing the person from communications, I see that person is a public relations officer too. In terms of the rationale, I am presuming that there would have been more senior people in communications. So in terms of the rationale for not choosing a more senior person, or perhaps even the head of communications, can you give us an explanation as to why that decision was made?
I have 3 positions within my communications unit that are public servants. We have a PRO 1, a PRO 2, and a PRO 3. The PRO 1 had previously been scheduled to go to Tobago with the minister on a previous occasion, and even though we had made all the necessary arrangements, the person was unable to attend because of personal commitments, and the personal commitments still exist. The PRO 3 has previously been not well and has some mobility issues.
So the 1 is the most senior person, I'm taking it?
The 3.
The 3? Okay. The other question, now in terms of the expenditure and the figure quoted, I know that from the report, company when accompanied with part of the delegation, can you tell us whether there's a separate cost would have been incurred for the 3 members of the sport company?
Yeah, no, the sport company did not come with the ministry. They attended on their own.
Can you perhaps give us an idea of the costs that would have been incurred by the sport company?
I will ask for Kitty.
We don't have that course here now, but we can provide it in writing.
So is that something you can provide to us?
Yes, we
writing?
can.
Thank you.
Member Coffey.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Madam PS, I note in the report of the Director of Youth Affairs, there's a planned 5th Caribbean Regional Youth Summit carded for September 28, 20 to 28, 2017. Could you give some idea of what is intended there? Because I see cost of $343,400. Is it that you are going to host this summit from the Ministry's resources? Are you going to seek cabinet approval? And it says it's a regional youth summit, so I assume that people are going to be invited to Trinidad and Tobago. I want to get some idea of this event.
Okay, I'm going to let the Director Youth give you some more information, but I can say that it is a collaboration between Ministry of Sport and THA with regards to providing the Caribbean Regional Youth Council additional funds with regards to certain things like accommodation and transportation, and that was one of the key discussions that we had at the THA with regards to what our cost would be.
Good afternoon again. The 5th Caribbean Youth Leaders Summit is a summit that is organized for the meeting of minds of the young people across the Caribbean, representatives of various national youth organizations and regional youth structures, and it was decided at the last summit, which was held in Belize, that they proposed to host the 5th summit in Tobago. All right, it is intended to coincide with culminate with the Tobago House of Assembly Annual Youth Awards on the 30th of September, which is also Commonwealth Youth Day.
Madam Chair, what I'm trying to get is, this is a regional event. Has Cabinet been approached for the hosting of the event and to provide funding for the event?
Okay,
go
ahead.
Oh, yeah. It is the intention of it's intended that the Minister will approach Cabinet once a final decision is made between the Tobago House of Assembly and the Ministry in terms of the resources that we will expend towards the hosting of the conference.
The reason I'm asking the question, you said that when the meeting was held in Belize, the decision was made that the next one will be in Tobago. So that's a regional commitment that has been made. So I'm trying to get an idea of how a commitment could be made to host a meeting in Tobago without a cabinet approval or sanction.
No, the decision was not made or facilitated by the ministry. We did not participate in that summit. It's the young people of the region that elected to host the 5th summit in Tobago.
So it's not a commitment, then it's a desire, a wish.
Yes, it is a wish by the young people.
Just 1 minute, Member Duki. All right, Member Mark, it's on this?
Yes.
Member Mark.
It's just a follow-up, Madam Chair, on an earlier intervention I made. I just wanted to ask the Permanent Secretary. We have been informed through newspaper reports, and I do not like to go on newspapers' reports because we need to confirm these things, that 1 out of the 13 persons, or is it 12? 12 persons, and coming out of your ministry, have since been transferred to the office of the Prime Minister. As I said, I saw this in the newspaper, and I don't like to go with newspapers' reports. Could you confirm, deny, rubbish that particular allegation that has been peddled in the newspapers, or one way or the other?
As far as I'm aware, no one has been transferred from the ministry.
No one has been transferred?
No.
Right. Thank you very much.
Member Dookie.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The Acting Permanent Secretary referred to a period of trauma in the ministry, and in putting it into context, the Permanent Secretary referred to live sport. And in her opening remarks, the Permanent Secretary indicated that the ministry is embarking upon change. So my question is this: what are the major change initiatives taking place in the ministry at this time, and I'm putting that into the context of the period of trauma that you referred to?
I think the main change that is being undertaken by the ministry is basically trying to get all the persons within the ministry to do things in a particular way, such as trying to use proper procurement procedures, proper documentation, doing things in that is efficient and effective, rather than, as I said, that's something that you have to change with regards to the persons that are there. It's not something that that you can just instruct persons and they will just go ahead and we'll just automatically start doing things in a particular way. It has been a long process. We have had a number of different meetings, and basically it's a process of change that we have to go through. So I don't know if that answers your question.
I could, if you allow, Madam Chair, interpret what you said to some extent in the context of the culture which exists in your organization, and you're saying that you are embarking on some initiatives to bring about some cultural adjustments. And you did mention a while ago about having meetings and of course sharing information. So the question I want to ask is this now: has that been working, or have the meetings in fact been working? Are you seeing adjustments to behavior?
I have been seeing adjustments to how things are submitted. I don't know that we are having as much success with regards to behaviors. And it is something that we have to look at, and we may need to get additional help.
And additional help means what? Are you talking about external support?
External professional support, because some of, and I won't go into it here, I mean, a lot of the reactions that you find happens at the ministry is not necessarily the normal reactions that you would get in another ministry. You find that persons are quick to jump to the defensive, they're quick to react in certain ways. So I do think that it is, even though I have seen improvements in the way the work is being done, I do think that a lot deeper intervention is necessary.
So you're convinced that external support is needed?
I think so, yes.
Okay, Madam Permanent Secretary, from the questions asked earlier, I formed the impression, and I might be wrong, that you would not have had any concern about the size or the nature of the delegation on the Tobago trip.
I don't know that I don't have a concern about the size. I do think that it was the cost of doing business. The rates are high, basically, with regards to even the hotel accommodation. I do think that the persons who were required for the other meetings, that they were necessary, mainly because I think the site visit, especially to Dwight York Stadium, was extremely enlightening. The conditions there are, I think it's appalling with regards to not being able to actually use that facility. And we do have a lot of events that are coming up at that particular facility. And I do think it was necessary for us to actually see what was really happening at that facility rather than a lot of different, because we've got a lot of reports in front of us, and I think sometimes it doesn't make that kind of, you don't get that sense of urgency that's, sometimes you would get if you actually go and see a location.
But pictures or videos would not have done it?
I have seen the pictures and the videos, but I don't think that anything prepares you to go to a facility where the entire floor of the stadium, bottom floor of the stadium, is filled with equipment that is completely useless. I mean, it's mind-boggling to me.
All right. So you would say then that the cost of the trip was value for money for the taxpayer?
I do think so, yes.
You do think so. Now, with respect to the additional people, you said that some people were intended to go in any event. Would their stay have been as long as the stay which occurred?
Their stay would have been approximately 2 days, and they would have also had to attend the THA Awards, which would have been another night.
All right. And you said you found the rates were high. Were there other options for accommodation?
No other options were looked at. We did use the Madalena grant.
All right. But are there other options that one could consider?
Yes, there are.
Yes. Okay. And let me ask you one last question. Do you have a mechanism to test the reasonableness of expenditure? Or do you employ a mechanism for test of reasonableness of expenditure?
I would say that there's no measure. We don't have anything employed.
No, not we. You.
No.
Because as a permanent secretary, you have a particular responsibility
to
safeguard the state resources.
Yeah.
So do you have a test for expenditure, the reasonableness expenditure? What would guide you in the discharge of that fund? Say whether expenditure is justified or not, whether it's reasonable or not.
Well, I would look at the benefits.
You would look at the benefits?
Yes.
Yeah. So in this particular instance, you would say that the expenditure was reasonable?
I think we could have been a little bit more prudent, especially with probably the timing of when persons were coming in and going out of Tobago. We were constrained a little bit by the availability of flights. Two of our flights were actually cancelled on the Friday. But I do think that we could have scheduled it a little bit better.
Okay. Let me ask you something. The technical competence would have come from the Ministry or the sports company?
Well, both. Because the manager would have been there, the director of physical education and sports, because it falls under the ministry, we actually look after the maintenance and the repairs to the actual facility in Dwight York. However, we do rely on Sport TT, and we have been relying on Sport TT with regards to technical expertise, especially as it pertains to the roof at the Dwight York Stadium. So we do rely on them for technical expertise.
And therefore, if you relied on them for technical expertise in terms of the prudence, wouldn't have the members of Sport TT been sufficient for the purpose of the technical aspect of the visit?
Well, the Director of Sport Division is also relatively new to the ministry. And I do think because the Dwight York Stadium falls under the ministry, and as well as the maintenance, it is necessary for that division to have a very hands-on approach to the Dwight York Stadium.
Okay, let me ask you something. I mean, is in the public domain, you would have seen a public outcry. Have you learned any lessons from this experience?
Yes.
Would you like to share with us what are the lessons you've learned?
Well, I do think that we need to be better able to schedule how we are going about reviewing the facilities that we do have. I do think it is necessary for us to have a proper maintenance and repair plan for all our facilities so that we don't have to necessarily be going on site visits and to that extent. So, and also I do think it is necessary to make sure that we are really getting value for our expenditure. And while I do think that it was necessary, I think that we could have been a little bit more prudent with regards to the number of persons and the time frame.
And what about the level of the accommodation?
The level of accommodation, as I said, we did use Madalena Grant, and I do think that we should be able to use other hotel accommodation.
But nothing prevents you from using other accommodation?
Nothing prevents us. No.
Okay. Now, my last question to you, do you have a whistleblower policy?
Sorry?
Do you have a whistleblower policy in your ministry?
Not that I'm aware of.
All right. Are you considering one?
I don't know that that would be an individual ministry initiative or a public service initiative.
But
I would suggest,
my question is, are you considering one in your ministry?
Not at this present time.
Okay, thank you. Member Coffey, Member Mark, in that order.
To you, Madam Chair. Madam PS, I see from the sports company's investigation suggested budget of $54.2 million for the repair of the Dwight York Stadium. Now, I see this was suggested by one person. I am trying to determine whether how this was arrived at, whether there was a tender. What was the process to arrive at one single estimate by a company for the repair of the stadium?
I'm going to let Sport TT take that one.
So thanks, PS. So what you're saying in front of you, honourable member, is not any contract awarded or so on. As I was explaining earlier, what we'd have done is a conditional estimate. What we had is a consultancy company go in and look at every item of the engineering scope of works, civil, mechanical, electrical, and so on. Their remit is to come up with an estimate of what the overall budget is. This budget will be used to go to cabinet for approval of the overall scope of works. Then we go out for procurement for the individual packages of work. So all you're seeing before you is what the total scope would consist of, and we can provide the document which justifies every item of the scope, individualized.
To you, Madam Chair, I was under the impression that that kind of scope you will get from a state enterprise, a special purpose company like UDCOT, NIBDEC, MTS. But this scope comes from a private company that is going to inform the sports company's approach to the project. So was there any attempt made to get a ministry or a special purpose company to look at the project to inform? There's a good example. You use the UDCOT for the Brian Lara Stadium. Why would you go to a private company for the Dwight York Stadium?
Well, in terms of how conditional estimates are done, what we'd have done is go out for open tender for consultancy services. Similar to Brian Lara Stadium, even though UDCOT would have been undertaking work at the Brian Lara Stadium, they still have a consultancy company engaged at Brian Lara doing due diligence for them. So it's not abnormal in the construction industry to have a consultancy partner for the project. They would bring a certain level of expertise also that the ministry and a sport company may not have, based on the amount of projects under our portfolio at the point in time. Our internal quantity surveyors would then go through their estimates to ensure that it is in line with industry standards, so there's no inflation in price and costing. Further to that, when we go out for tender, longer, the market will dictate what the price of the project, the true price of the project is. So what this is here is a preliminary estimate of what it should cost.
Okay. Can I ask in writing for a copy of the advertisement?
Sure.
The tender procedures and a copy of the award determination that would have led to this company being awarded the consultancy services for the Drycross Stadium?
Sure, that can be provided in writing.
Member Mark.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I wanted to return to the matter of whistleblowing raised by the Chair, Permanent Secretary. How long have you been acting as Permanent Secretary?
In the Ministry of Sport? Since January.
January. Are you familiar with the government's policy as it relates to whistleblowing in Trinidad and Tobago?
Yes.
And if you are, the question that the chairman raised is that if you're aware and you do not now have a whistleblowing policy, having regard to the policy of the government as it relates to whistleblowing, would you not want to consider taking measures as a matter of urgency to have established a whistleblowing policy within the Ministry of Sport and Youth Affairs, reflecting the government's thrust in this particular area?
I don't know that I agree that each individual ministry needs to have a separate policy. I do think we have processes and procedures, which I'm very happy and willing to do, but I do think that we need to have one public service policy with regards to that.
And as far as you're aware, there is none existing in the public service at this time?
Not that I'm aware of.
That you're aware of. Now, coming back to the Dwight York Stadium, are discussions on the way having the Dwight York Stadium handed over to the THA, seeing that the THA under the THA Act is responsible for sport and other activities within Tobago, and seeing that the Dwight York Stadium is in Tobago? Are there any discussions on the way to address this issue of having the THA? Because if the THA had responsibility for the maintenance, I would imagine they would have done a better job than the Ministry of Sport.
I don't know that I would agree with that, but I have had discussions with the administrator in Tobago, and that is the end goal that we want to have, right? So we did both agree that the stadium itself needed to be in a state of at a particular level before we just hand over the stadium. But we are working together with regards to working out how we can repair and look at the maintenance of the Dwight York Stadium together.
So it is your intention, or maybe policy objective, of course with the approval of the government, to eventually enter into some memorandum of understanding with the THA to have them maintain ultimately the Dwight York Stadium?
That would be my suggestion, and like I said, it would have to go to cabinet.
Okay, thank you, Madam.
Member Bodo.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Madam PS, I just want to come back to the point made by the chairman here and to look at the figures again, and it's a little bit mind-boggling because when I look at the cost of the 88,310 divided by 12, it comes up with $7,359. And just to use your term of the cost of business and value for money, I know you gave certain assurances, but can you give this committee and by extension the taxpaying public the assurance that going forward, there would be some policy within the ministry in terms of exploring the options for accommodation as opposed to just choosing one hotel? Or is that something is in place, or it's not in place in the ministry?
It's not in place in the ministry, but I completely agree.
So can you give the committee
Yes,
the
I
assurance
would,
that
I
will
would
be
commit to that.
the policy going forward?
Yes.
Thank you.
Member Kafi?
Madam PS, I just wanted to ask, why was not consideration given to use of vehicles from the THA or CAS for the weekend rather than taxi renters?
I agree that it is something that we should have explored, and we would do so in the future.
All right, and Madam Pierce, I just wanted to get some clarification in that you said that you felt it was the cost of business and nothing, and this might be my summarization, nothing beat going and seeing for yourself, okay? You all went and you saw for yourself at a cost of $92,000 plus whatever sport TNT costs will be, which I expect is something that would be presented to the committee in writing. What next? Having gone and seen, and that was the benefit. What next?
Right, so we are now in a position where we are looking at what our short-term and our long-term action plans are with regards to the works that needs to be completed at the Dwight York Stadium. We have established that the roofing is definitely something that we may not be in a position to effect repairs on in the short term. However, and as I said, sometimes it's necessary to actually go and see, because what they have actually done is that there's actually roofing on the different offices under the roof that is in a state of disrepair also, that can be repaired, but it needs to have a certain type of material, because right now the stadium is really flooding out whenever it rains. As well as we are right now in the process of negotiating with THA with regards to the lighting of the stadium, because right now it has no lighting either. So, like I said, basically what we have come up with now is a short-term action plan, and we do have a long-term one also. But in the immediate short term, we are looking at the roofing that is under the that is at the administrative offices, so that we can at least try to prevent some of the flooding that is happening in the stadium, so that we can have some use of it.
Okay, so would I be wrong in saying that the only two benefits of this big contingent going was for 12 people to see for themselves, all right? And for you all to determine that your short-term plan would be to fix, I would say, the under roof.
Well, it's not only the Dwight York Stadium. We also met with THA with regards to the youth areas, especially with regards to the different projects and the programs that are going on right now under the youth division, which includes the youth registration drive, and as well as looking at the review of the national youth policy to collaborate with Tobago, because we didn't want to, right now we have the national sport policy also that we also discussed, that is being undertaken, and Tobago right now is also doing a national sport policy, and we didn't want the exactly same thing to happen with regards to us having two separate policies. Rather, we would want to have one youth policy, and that was something that was agreed to at that meeting also.
Okay. All right. So as far as the state of the Dwight York Stadium, that was one of the things you all went for. The only immediate gain we could see is whatever sort of temporary work will be done to the roof.
Well, not only that, there's the temporary repairs to the roof. We also had to look at the gout in the, I don't know if you know where they would have joined the front stadium, when you go into a stadium, they have the different step downs. Right, so what they normally do is they normally would join them. Apparently, the gout that would have been used there would have been the incorrect gout should be used in these climates. So we would be also looking at replacing that also, because right now that is also assisting with the severe flooding also.
So what I'm saying is neither of those two, and those are all the short-term gains, or there are more, as far as the Dwight York Stadium.
We also wanted to look at the bolts that are eroded in the roof, that we can't really go and do the overall repairs to that bigger project of the roof, but we have corroded bolts that we can also replace.
So I'm trying to identify the short-term gains which the visit would justify. So when would the bolts be changed? In this fiscal year?
I am going to have to see. No.
Thanks again, PS. So just to expand a little, what sport company would have done there is to really show to the ministry what are the critical works needed at this point in time. I think what is missing here also is the fact that there are areas of Dwight York under prohibition notice from OSHA at this point in time. So there are some works that need to happen immediately so that that prohibition notice can be lifted. There are also issues of structural decay to the facility, which are things like the rusted and pitted bolts and so on. There are a number of issues of leaking and so on. So part of the takeaway, I think, from sport companies' side and the ministry for the visit is really what are the things that can be done, as Pierre said, in the short, medium, and long term. We as sport company now will prepare for them a scope of works and an estimate just for the specific items and not the overall upgrade of the facility, which would lift the prohibition notice and allow a lot of the national level events to be held in Tobago. For instance, there's a request by TFA to host national games in Tobago also. There are a lot of requests for track and field also in Tobago that can't be facilitated at this time.
Mr. Blake, all I want you all to tell the public, okay? There might be plenty things that in our report could be covered. I want to know what are the takeaways. What I've heard from you all is that the value for money is that we went and we saw, okay? There's not going to see one of the wonders of the world. What are the immediate consequences, results that the people of Trinidad and Tobago could say, yes, it costs a lot of money, but this was fixed in 2 weeks, this was fixed in a month. What? And I'm going to ask for each one. It was the Dwight York. Has the national youth policy been advanced by the meeting? I don't know. Yes or no?
Yes, it was.
Okay, so it's near to completion?
But we have approached cabinet with regards to getting the funds allocated for
so that's between May 18th and now? I want to know if that can be looked as an advance from the visit.
No, we had already.
That was before May 18th?
Yeah.
All right. The CARICOM Youth Ambassador Program, was that advanced by the meeting?
Yes.
Yes? So when are we likely to see a completion and implementation?
Right, so we want to approach cabinet by either next week or, well, actually by next week with regards to that conference.
All right, the National Youth Organization registration, how was that advanced?
I'll have to ask the
Well, since the visit to Tobago, we were able to finalize the proposal, which would have taken on board some of the ideas in terms of the design of the database, interactive, and the Division of Sport and Youth Affairs will also have administrative access to the database, as well as they were asking for youth organizations nationally similar youth organizations, for example, and all environmental organizations may be able to pull information so that they can network among themselves. And we have also passed that information to IT, who's due to do a presentation, initial presentation for us in terms of the database on Thursday.
Okay, so without the visit, that could not have been achieved?
Well, the idea came up at the meeting in Tobago from the Tobago Youth Council.
Okay, and what I'm saying is, without the visit, that could not have been achieved. The ideas could not have been sourced without the visit. That's what I'm trying to find out.
I do think it was important for us to actually meet with the Youth Council and meet with these young individuals to get their ideas.
All right. And what about the National Sport Tobago Sport Policy? How was that advanced by the visit?
Right, so that was something that was already ongoing. However, we did have discussions with regards to the way in which it was going to move forward, right? So the actual sport policy for Tobago, our ministry, our legal officer, our senior legal officer, actually, he submitted to me the finalized draft policy for Tobago, which would have been finalized after we had already gone to Tobago. So he actually submitted that to me yesterday. So hopefully Tobago's, now we are trying to still align it to ours, but we are still in the draft stage. So even though Tobago's one is a little bit more advanced than ours, we are still trying to align it to our draft, which we have revised, and we are hoping that so that Tobago's zone would still reflect some of what we are trying to do here in Trinidad.
Okay, so that would not be delivered in the short term. That's being completed this fiscal. This fiscal.
Mm-hmm.
All right, so that according to you, by the end of this fiscal,
Mm-hmm.
you should have the National and Tobago Sport Policy.
Mm-hmm.
You should have, with the youth registration, the National Youth Organization registration be complete.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
You should have some final word on the CARICOM Youth Ambassador Program.
Yes.
And all of these are coming out of the visit.
Mm-hmm.
All right? Okay, so that what I would like to put you on notice is that come September,
Mm-hmm.
this committee would invite you all back to see where you've reached on these short-term deliverables, including the short-term deliverables on the disrepair in the Dwight York Stadium.
Yeah.
Member Mark.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Madam Chair, I would like to ask the Permanent Secretary to supply you, on behalf of the committee, with a detailed breakdown of the $88,310.43 that would have been expended on car rental expenses and accommodation expenses. We'd like to know how many cars you rented, if you rented maxi taxis, how many maxis you rented, did you hire drivers, did the people drive themselves, and in terms of meals and so on. Give us a detailed breakdown of this expenditure of $88,310.43.
I'd like to include that for the Sport Company of Trinidad and Tobago. Okay? Members, any further questions? Okay, so I would like to invite the PS, if she wishes, to make a closing statement before we suspend this meeting.
I would just like to say that I always welcome the opportunity to come before either any of these committees with regards to either joint select or for public accounts, because I do think that it is necessary for us to work together to move forward and ensure that we are really achieving what we set out to do at the beginning of each fiscal, and that we do have a long-term policy and plan in place as we move forward. So I thank you.
Okay, and I want to thank you, PS, and the members of your ministry, the representatives of Sport TNT, for coming and assisting us here today. I want to thank the members of the media and the members of the listening and viewing public who have stayed with us during this afternoon's proceedings. I therefore now suspend this meeting and wish you all a safe journey home. Thank you.
Thank you.